Good morning, it is filled to the brim, and it is Friday, July 16th, and we're talking about being filled with Christ's attitude of love, which is agape love, and we're going through 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we talked about how love is patient, love is kind, and now I want to talk about love does not envy. Now listen, we have this love of God in us because we were born into the things of God through our salvation. We are new creations now. And so therefore we have the agape love, the love of the Father dwelling in us. And so what this 1 Corinthians 13 love chapter is asking of us is possible through the power of the Holy Spirit and through the supernatural love that God has placed in us. And now in 1 Corinthians 13 verse 4, Paul says what love is not. He says love does not envy. Envy. Wow. You know, it's interesting because he says what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is a contrast. He is using a contrast here because he has just said what love is, now what love is not. So let's look at the definition of envy. It's a feeling of discontentment or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or blessings. So it's really looking at somebody else and wanting what they have. It's actually the opposite of altruism. You know, when I was thinking about kindness, the word altruism came up, and altruism is a selfless concern for the well-being of others, a devotion for their well-being, even at your own cost or at your own expense. That's what altruism is even though it costs me, I have such a concern for you and want the best for you. It doesn't matter that it costs me. Envy is the opposite. It's the desire, the want of what other people have, and envy is very selfish. As selfishness. It's the central aspect to being envious is selfishness. And we have to beware of that. We have to beware of having a discontentment. See, selfishness and envy comes from discontentment. Longing for what somebody else has, as if I can have what they have, then somehow it's going to fill a void in me where I lack contentment. Because contentment means to be satisfied and pleased, to be satisfied with what you have. You know, it's interesting because Paul addresses the concept of contentment, and in 1 Timothy 6:6-10, I want to read to you the danger of lacking contentment. Okay, so here it goes. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Now, Paul begins with godliness with contentment is great gain. So he says this, listen, the answer to your life is godliness with contentment. Be content with what God has given to you. Be content with who God has made you be and become and what the resources that the Lord has given. And envy is connected with a lack of contentment because envy is focused on what other people have, desiring those things. The central aspect of envy is discontentment. This passage shows where discontentment can create sinful behavior that leads you into all kinds of ruin, that leads you into destructive behavior and destructive results. Now, Paul uses materialism and the hunger and the greed and the envy for money. However, that envy can take on a lot of forms even outside of money or the love for money. It can take on forms of envying somebody else's relationship, envying what somebody has in a relationship and thinking if I could just have that person, then therefore I would have that type of relationship. because envy is linked directly with discontentment, and discontentment is linked with temptation and falling into temptation because of discontent. You know what? We have to beware of that spirit. You know, when we are having the spirit of discontentment, we are lacking godliness. Godliness with contentment is great gain. That is foundational. That's when we're building our house, our life, our relationships on the rock, Jesus. But when we lack godliness and contentment, we're starting to build our house on shifting sand, on the things of this world. Beware of that spirit. Beware of that temptation to fall into the temptation of envy. It is not of the Lord. You know, James 3:14-16. Let's read this. He says this, "But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic." It's demonic. It's earthly, fleshly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. You know what? Envy is toxic. Paul is saying, listen, if that temptation to have an envious spirit, desire for what other people have comes upon you, or you're struggling with that, recognize where it comes from. Recognize it's from the enemy. Recognize it can lead you into temptation and cause you to fall into every kind of evil practice. It is dangerous. It is dangerous. You know, the truth is this. If you've become envious of others, in whatever way, what other kind of relationships they have, if they have, you know, children or a marriage or resources or money or ministry or whatever, and you've become envious, you need to recognize that it is from the enemy. There is no good thing in envy. It does not motivate you in any good way. It is from the enemy, and according to James chapter 3:14-16, it is demonic and unspiritual, and it will usurp you, it will usurp your strength, and it gets your eyes off Jesus. It gets your eyes off Jesus. Proverbs 23:17-18. Do not let your heart envy sinners. Wow, how can the righteous envy sinners? But you know what? So many times we're looking at the wrong things. We're looking at the world. We're actually believing what the world is saying about their lives, and we start to envy sinners even. But always be zealous for the fear of the Lord. There is surely a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. Get your eyes on Jesus. A lot of times we think, well, you know, we're struggling with this envy because people have more than we have. But the truth is this, we put our eyes off of Jesus. We've fixed our eyes on people, and we've put our eyes off of Jesus. Jesus says, you have a future and a hope in me. I am all that you need. I am your resources. And this is the thing. We can't have agape love flowing through us if we're envious of other people. I want to encourage you, admire people, but don't envy them. You can admire people. Admire means to honor them or respect, have approval of what their lives, have a respect for who they are. You can admire them without envying them. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Don't let the spirit of envy come in to your relationships, come into your spirit and create destruction in the way that you're functioning in your life, in the way that you're thinking, in the way that where your spirit is truly going. You know what? Take that captive and say, you know what, Lord, fill me with your agape love. Fill me with your agape love. I fix my eyes on you. And the flow comes from the Father through you to other people. Do not envy. Love does not envy. God bless you. Pray about this word.